Hello, I'm Dr. Greg Linville, your host for this AGON Institute of Sports Ministries video training session on the theology of competition in sport. We just finished in our last video a section on the Greco, ancient Greek partaking of the integration of faith in sport. And now let's take a look at the Roman. They flowed out of the Greek, very much of the same era, but very different. And last time I said that if we look at the sportsmanship model, kind of this is the way that humans look at it, so therefore a humanistic view of the ethic or the religion, if you will, of sport, that the ancient Greeks were much more of the humanistic perspective, and they would mirror what we would call today sportsmanship. But this always devolves into gamesmanship, and it's much more hedonistic. And so the Romans now are coming to the hedonistic part of this, what we would call today gamesmanship, as we would compare it later on to what we would call Christmanship for Christians. First slide that has been provided to you. Characteristics of the ancient Roman athletics. They were devoid of any kind of faith. They were devoid of any kind of faith-sport integration. Became less and less that way. Unless you might say that the deity involved in it would have been an emperor. And we know that they thought the emperors, or at least they accredited to the emperors, godlike status. And therefore, because the Romans primarily went away from anything to do with any kind of religiosity, integration of faith, it became very decadent, very hedonistic, very secular. The Romans were really not fond of competition the way that the Greeks were. They kind of looked down on the running against each other, the jumping against each other, the throwing of things against each other. They were not fans of competition because they basically didn't have anybody to compete with. They ruled the world. And so they adapted athletics. They adapted athletics into theatrical entertainment. The empire had no peer and thus had no rival, and so they didn't think that they needed to prepare for competition. They just wanted to be entertained. Rome agreed with Sparta, the city-state of ancient Greece. Athletics are only good for preparation for war. And to spend all of one's time in athletics is a simple waste of time to them. They also thought it was unthinkable to ever submit themselves to a trainer. And the trainer of athletes had no birth position. They had no position at all. And therefore, to a Roman, this would be unthinkable to submit themselves to their coaching, to their training. Also, they were different than the Greeks, where the Greeks performed without any clothes. This was far below a Roman's dignity to appear naked in public. They had been conditioned also by the ravages of war and what they saw there. And so to watch some naked guys run around a track just wasn't very appealing to them. But now gladiator battles, those gladiatorial battles that brought blood and gore and death and the utmost of human battle, this appealed, sickly in my mind, but this appealed to the Romans. If you go to your fourth slide, let's talk a little bit about some of the battles. They were man-on-man in places like the Colosseum, the Circus Maximus, and other places. But there were even water battles that were taking place in large bodies of water, but also bodies of water that were created just for these on-the-water battles between ships. and other kinds of flotation devices. The battalions of men that would battle were sometimes 500 against 500, 300 horsemen against each other. And the war battles would consist of thousands of sailors. These battles very much were to the death. And they forced criminals. They forced criminals to battle against wild beasts. Sometimes they were bound to crosses and stakes out in the middle of the Colosseum and other places and left completely defenseless while these wild animals would come and attack them. It was really a very horrible situation, and we can very much say that they devolved. The games devolved under the Romans. And we just have to state very clearly that it was about death rather than life. And even these so-called athletic contexts in ancient Rome, what was going on there even bled over, sorry for the pun, it wasn't meant that way, but it even bled over into the theater. And that the people, again, criminals, those people who were thought less of in the Roman experience and government, these people that they wanted to do away with, they were forced to play in the plays, in the theater, the roles of the people who had evil done to them, even death, even being skinned alive on stage. And so even the theater, the art world, so to speak, was characterized by this brutality. And these people that were come into the Colosseums, they would be paraded in front of Caesar. And they were to say, "Hail Caesar. Those who are about to die salute you." And this is what they were to say to Caesar. And if they didn't, they were killed on the spot. At least if they could survive, they might survive the gladiatorial battle. And when one particular gladiator would have another one down on the ground, often it would be the last two, he would put his sword up to Caesar or to the crowd, asking for a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Yeah, you thought it started with Pandora or some other apps in your world. No, the thumbs up and thumbs down stems from this. And if that gladiator who had the last victim on the ground, do I run him through with the sword? Do I cut his neck? Emperor, thumbs up, thumbs down. Crowd, thumbs up, thumbs down. Sometimes the crowd would beg for mercy. You get a sense. This background picture of this particular slideshow that you have is of the ancient Colosseum. And you can see that all the walls and all the little bits of hallway, these were the underground. And what you can't see today, because it doesn't exist, was that there was a floor that was above all of that. And these were the cages of the wild animals. These were the cages of the people and the prisoners. And then they had trap doors that came up through. And then they were released. And they came out in this huge arena. And this is where the battles and the blood was shed. And literally, what covered this floor was sand, so that it would absorb the blood and the gore. And it was easier cleaned up and taken away until the next battle. All right, so we are in a short series here of trying to help us understand our modern day theology of competition in sport by looking at how it was, in these very brief overviews, how it was envisioned by the Greeks and the Romans. And we've made the case now that the Greeks tried their best, as much as they could from a humanistic perspective, to make the games good and wholesome. The Romans made no pretense of that. And where this was sportsmanship for the Greek, it became gamesmanship. I'm going to win and survive at any cost. And where we're going to go from here is we're going to take a brief look at the Jewish perspective. And all of this will help us understand the different perspectives in our day and age, the 21st century, about how people look at the integration of faith and sport, and then how we are to design our sports outreaches and our fitness ministries, and how we are to think about this in a very pragmatic way. That's all coming. Thanks for joining us for this particular video on the ancient Roman integration or lack of integration of faith and sport. Thanks for joining me.